Well, hello, everybody. I was able to find a web page that I thought was gone forever. It's the original Raven 1 Net Unicom HTML, which explains the state of unclassified and commercial technology capable of electronic mind control effects. Original author is Eleanor White, April 4th, 2000. This page keeps popping up, but it's very hard to find. So while I have it, I'm going to read it for you so that you can appreciate the importance of this. We need a program of psychosurgery and political control of our society. The purpose is physical control of the mind. Everyone who deviates from the given norm can be surgically mutilated. The individual may think that the most important reality is his own existence, but this is only his personal point of view. This lacks historical perspective. Man does not have the right to develop his own mind. This kind of liberal orientation has great appeal. We must electronically control the brain. Someday armies and generals will be controlled by electrical simulation of the brain. Dr. Jose Delgado, MK Ultra experimenter who demonstrated a radio-controlled bull on CNN in 1985. Director of Neuropsychiatry, Yale University Medical School. Congressional Record number 26, volume 118, February 24th, 1974. Again, this guy is one of these sickos. Under Church Commission, the MK Ultra programs were declared unconstitutional and human rights violations. This article starts out with the monkey experimentations in restraints, wires coming out of the top of his skull. The left image, normal. The right image, with electric current being fed into the monkey's brain. Note the pupil sizes and clenched teeth. These images portray Dr. Delgado's ruthless disregard for life, pain, and suffering. Now, I apologize that I'm going to do everything I can to try to add the links. Hopefully the web doesn't delete them, but I will go over this entire document for you now. You can see that it is very exhaustive, with great links, very well organized. But I'm going to skip forward after slowly scrolling through this so that you can have a chance to pause at any time and further review the information. Again, down in the link below, I will include what resources I have to allow you to link to this page. Section 1, limitations. I'm going to skip that. Section 2, Introduction. Electronic mind control technology had its start in the 1950s as an obscure branch of the CIA's MK Ultra project group. This, as organized crime, is not stopped by hearings and court cases. Neither did this originally obscure branch of MK Ultra activity when in the institutional drug child abuse phases were exposed by the U.S. Senate Church in Yahoo hearings in the late 1970s. No criminal proceedings followed, and only two civil lawsuits, Orlikau and Bonizzi, have succeeded. This assembly of unclassified and commercial literature is to show investigators and concerned citizens that in spite of the tightest possible information blackout imposed in the earliest 1970s, enough of the classified mind control technology has leaked out to show that significant classified accomplishments are overwhelmingly likely and in need of disclosure here at the end of the 20th century. It is hoped that government and media who have shied away from this topic for decades, preferring the warm, fuzzy feelings that this can't be true, will read about the unclassified and commercial devices and understand the implications of continued turning the other way. Section 3, Mind Control Effects. Since government-backed electronic mind control is classified at the highest levels in all technology-capable governments, the description of effects is taken from the personal experiments of over 300 known involuntary experimentees. These experimentees, without exception, report that once the testing begins, the classified experiment specification apparently requires that the testing be continued for life. Many are young seniors, some in their 70s and 80s. Some have children, and the children are often subjected to the same testing as their parents. The effects of pattern. This article is about the unclassified commercial technologies which can produce some of the effects of classified equipment, not testimonials. But this is much has become clear over time. All testing consists of unique, carefully engineered, unprovable events to produce psychological stress in the victim. There are no events which do not fit that appropriate purpose. In every series of stress event type, one introductory event of very high energy effect is staged. The obvious purpose is to be certain the victim knows this is external harassment and not just bad luck. From that time forward, the experimenters appear to apply Pavlovian training so that they can get the victim to jump or react in some way to the same effect as a tiny fraction of the initial introductory event. This type of testing started during the Cold War and shows every characteristic of being for military and intelligence psychological warfare purposes. This type of testing all points to control of the test subject. Endlessly repeated words generated inescapably within the skull are just one of the hypnosis-like experience. Given that control is likely ultimate purpose, involuntary test subjects become a necessity. Thus, the phenomenon of people apparently being chosen at random for this work. Sound familiar, targeted individuals? Given a requirement for involuntary test subjects, the only group with the necessary funds and legal powers is government. Private contractors are no doubt the main perpetrators to keep the work well covered. But without secret complicity, the governments, this expensive, extensive, and illegal atrocity simply could not happen. The effect types are categorized. Here's a list of the most common effects. It is not exhaustive, but the intent is to show the reader how the perpetrator's palette of stress effects is broken down. Indent levels are used to show categories and subcategories. Invasive at-a-distance body effects, sleep deprivation and fatigue, silent but instantaneous application of electronic caffeine signal forces awake and keeps awake, loud noise from neighbors, noise campaigns, usually synchronized to attempts to fall asleep, precision to the second, allowed sleep, and forced awakening, far too precise and repeated to be natural. Daytime fatigue attacks can force the victim to sleep and/or weaken the muscles to the point of collapse. Audible voice to skull, or V2S, or is more recently being called V2K, delivered by a parent at a distance radio signal, made to appear as emanating from thin air. Voices or sound effects only the victim can hear. Inaudible voice to skull, silent sound, delivered by a parent at a distance radio signal, manifested by sudden urges to do something, go somewhere you would not otherwise want to do. Silent, ultrasonic hypnosis is presumed. Programming hypnotic triggers, i.e., specific phrases or other cues which can cause specific involuntary actions. Violent muscle triggering, flailing of limbs, leg or arm jerks to violently force awake and keep awake. Whole body jerks as if the body had been hit by a large jolt of electricity. Violent shaking of the body, seemingly as if on a vibrating surface, but where the surface is in reality not vibrating. Precision manipulation of body parts, slow, specific purpose. Manipulation of hands, forced to synchronize with closed eyes, but fully awake vision of previous day. Very powerful and coercive, not a dream. Slow bending, almost 90 degrees backwards of one toe at a time or one finger at a time. Direct at-a-distance control of breathing and vocal cords, induced involuntary speech. spot blanking of memory, long and short term, reading said silently to self thoughts, engineered skits where your thoughts are spoken to you by strangers on street or events requiring knowledge of what you were thinking. Real-time reading subvocalized words as while the victim reads a book and broadcasting those words to nearby people who form an amazed audience around the victim. Direct application of pain to body parts. Hot needles deep in the flesh sensation. Electric shots, no wires whatsoever applied. Powerful and unquenchable itching, often applied precisely when a victim attempts to do something to expose this work. Artificial fever, sudden, no illness present. Sudden racing heartbeat, relaxed situation. Surveillance and tracking, through-wall radar and ramping under your feet as you move about your apartment on ceiling of the apartment below. Through-wall radar used to monitor starting and stopping of your urination. Water below turned on and off in sync with your urine stream. Loud, raucous, artificial bird calls everywhere the victim goes, even into the wilderness. Invasive physical effects at a distance. Non-body. Stoppage of power to appliances. Manipulation of appliance settings. Temporary failures that fix themselves. Flinging of objects, including non-metallic. Precision manipulation of switches and controls. Force, obviously premature failure of appliances or parts. External stress generating skits. Now this one's the gang stalking. Participation of strangers, neighbors, and in some cases close friends and family members in harassment. Rudeness for no cause. Tradesmen always have problems. They block your car, etc. Purchase delays, spoiled or lost at a high rate. Usually loud music, noise far beyond normal. Break-ins, sabotage at home, shredding of clothing, destruction of furniture, petty theft. Engineered failures of utilities, sabotage at work. This is workplace mobbing. Repetitive damage to furniture, deletion or corruption of computer files. Planting viruses which could not have come from your computer usage pattern. Delivering goods delayed, spoiled or lost at a high rate. Spreading of rumors, sabotage to your working reputation. Direct sabotage and theft of completed work. Tradesmen often involved in showing obvious pleasure. Here we have an image from the Washington State Freedom of Information Act, which shows a depiction of the different types of attacks that they can achieve on the body. Remember, all of this has been in research and applied since 1974. Major technology classes. These technology classes are for the unclassified and commercial equipment which can emulate the real classified mind control equipment. Effect Section 2. Invasive physical effects at a distance. Clearly establishes the existence of remote precision manipulation of objects, which is far beyond the capabilities of unclassified and commercial equipment at the time of writing. Remote physical manipulation is not covered in this article, but the reader should know that both NASA and IEEE have noted success in creating very small anti-gravity effects, which are not due to simple magnetism. Transmission methods for neuroaffective signals. Pulsed microwave, i.e. radar-like signals. Ultrasound and voice FM transmitted through the air. While transmission of speech dating from the early 1970s was the first use of pulsed microwave, neuroaffective signals can now cause many other nerve groups to become remotely actuated. At the time of writing, that technology appears to be classified. Pavlovian hypnotic triggers. A Pavlovian hypnotic trigger is a phrase or any other sensory cue which the victim is programmed to involuntarily act on in a certain way. the 50s to 70s MK Ultra survivors can still be triggered from programming done decades ago. A name, Manchurian Candidate, from a novel by John Marks, is used to describe a person who carries Pavlovian triggers. One of the main goals of the institutional drug child abuse phases of CIA MK Ultra atrocities, 1950s through 70s, was to implant triggers using twilight state, half consciousness, medication, and tape-recorded hypnosis. The ultimate goal was to have the acting out of Pavlovian triggers erased from the victim's memory. Using one of the two transmission methods above, these triggers are now planted using either of the above two transmission methods, but with the words moved up just above or near the top of the audible frequency range. The result is that hypnotic triggers are planted without the subject being aware. This technology was used in Gulf War and has the name silent sound. Through-wall surveillance methods, so-called millimeter wave scanning. This method uses the very top end of the microwave radio signal spectrum, just below infrared, to view small objects or people clearly. The highest frequency that will penetrate non-conductive or poorly conductive walls is used. Millimeter wave scanning radar can be used in two modes. Passive, which means no signal radiated, uses background radiation already transmitted in the area to be scanned and is totally undetectable. And then active, low-power millimeter wave flashlight attached to the scanner just as a conventional light mounted on a camcorder, or the use of archaeological ground-penetrating radar. Thought reading. Thought reading can be classified as through-wall surveillance technology. Thought reading in the unclassified commercial realm can be broken down as follows: through skull microwave reading and magnetic skull proximity reading. Brain entrainment, the reverse of biofeedback. This low-frequency electrical brain rhythms, which are characteristics of various moods and states of sleep, can not only be read out using biofeedback equipment or EEG machines, but using radio, sound, contact electrodes, or flashing lights. The moods and sleep states can be generated or at least encouraged using brain entrainment devices. Brain entrainment signals cannot carry voice, which is a much higher frequency range. Brain entrainment can, however, be used to set up a target to make him or her more susceptible to hypnosis. These major technology classes can produce some of the observed mind control effects from hiding and undetectably, with the exception of remote physical manipulation. Implantation is sometimes used to assist the above technologies, but with a current device. Implants are no longer required. Diagram showing the overall method, based entirely on unclassified 1974 technology, of how silent hypnosis may be transmitted to a target without the targets being aware. This technique is probably the most insidious because it allows months and years of programming in Pavlovian trigger setting while the target cannot resist. Again, this is another image from the Washington State Fusion Center Freedom of Information, which shows the signal processing layout where you have two frequencies heterodyned into a carrier with the information modulated on it, and then put to a transmitter to where the brain is essentially the receiver. You're born with the radio receiver for this transmitter. Pulsed microwave. Pulsed microwave voice-to-skull or other sound-to-skull transmission was discovered during World War II by radar technicians who found they could hear the buzz of the train of pulses being transmitted by the radar equipment they were working on. This phenomenon has been studied extensively by Dr. Alan Fry, whose work has been published in a number of reference books. What Dr. Fry had found was that single pulses of microwave could be heard by some people as pops or clicks, while the train of uniform pulses could be heard as a buzz without benefit of any type of receiver. Dr. Fry also found that the wide range of frequencies as low as 125 megahertz, well below microwave, worked for some combination of pulse power and pulse width. Detailed unclassified studies mapped out those frequencies and pulse characteristics which are optimum for generation of microwave hearing. Very significantly, when discussing electronic mind control, is the fact that the peak pulse power required is modest, something like 0.3 watts per square centimeter of skull surface. And this power level is only applied for a very small percentage of each pulse cycle time. 0.3 watts per square centimeter is about what you get under a 250 watt heat lamp at a distance of 1 meter. It is not a lot of power. When you take into account that the pulse train is off, no signal, for most of each cycle, the average power is so low as to be nearly undetectable. Frequencies that act as voice-to-skull carriers are not single frequencies, as for example TV or cell phone channels are. Each sensitive frequency is actually a range or band of frequencies. A technology used to reduce both interference and detection is called spread spectrum. Spread spectrum signals have a carrier frequency hop around within a specified band. Unless a receiver knows the hop schedule in advance, there is virtually no chance of receiving or detecting a coherent, readable signal. Spectrum analyzers used for detection and receivers with a screen. A spread spectrum signal received on a spread spectrum analyzer appears just more static or noise. My organization was delighted to find the actual method of the first successful unclassified voice-to-skull experiment in 1974 by Dr. Joseph C. Sharp, then at the Walter Reed Army Institute of Research. Dr. Sharp's basic method is shown in Appendix PM6 below. A Fry-type audible pulse was transmitted every time the voice waveform passed down through the zero axes, a technique easily duplicated by ham radio operators who build their own equipment. It's called zero crossing detection. A pattern seems to be repeated where research could be used for mind control starts working. The unclassified researchers lose funding, and in some cases their notes have been confiscated and no further information on that research track is heard in the unclassified press. Pulsed microwave voice-to-skull research is one such track. Ultrasound and voice FM. Ultrasound is vibration of the air, a liquid or a solid above the upper limit of human hearing, which is roughly 15,000 hertz or 15 kilohertz in adults. Voice FM uses a tone at or near that upper limit, and the speaker's voice varies the frequency slightly. Either a tinnitus-like sound or nothing is heard by the target. Ultrasound voice FM can be transmitted in these ways: directly through the air using air-type transducers, directly to the brain using modulated microwave pulse trains, through the air by piggybacking an ultrasound message on top of commercial radio or television. The use of commercial radio or television requires that the input signal at the transmitter be relatively powerful, since radio and TV receivers are not designed to pass on ultrasound messages. However, the average radio and TV receiver does not simply stop ultrasound, rather the ability to pass ultrasound messages roll off, i.e. degrades, as the frequency is increased. Today, radios and TVs can carry enough ultrasound messaging to be heard by the human brain, though not the ear, to be effective in conveying hypnosis. This was proven by the U.S. military forces in the Gulf War. Ultrasounds and voice FM's main advantage in mind control work that it can carry verbal hypnosis more potent than simple biorhythm entrainment. The brain can hear and understand this inaudible voice, while the ear cannot. Once you can convey hypnotic suggestion which cannot be consciously heard, you have eliminated a major barrier to the subject's acceptance of the words being transmitted. In previous decades, subliminal advertising using voice and images at normal frequencies were time-sliced into an apparently normal radio TV broadcast. This apparently did not work well, and now Voice FM subliminal learning tapes, commercially available, have superseded the time-slice method. One method for projecting either audible voice or Voice FM over long distances, virtually undetectable if line of sight, is the acoustic heterodyne, or hypersonic sound, patented by American Technologies Corporation in San Diego, www.atcsd.com. Through-wall radar. When millimeter wave microwave signals are received, the waves are so small that they can display a two-dimensional outline of an object. Lower frequency radar can only show a blip, which indicates an object's presence or motion, but not its outline. A millimeter wave dish acts as a camera lens to focus incoming millimeter wave signals to the plate with two-dimensional array of elements sensitive to millimeter wave frequencies, in exactly the same way a camera focuses light onto a piece of film. Each of the sensitive elements is scanned in a definite order, just as with TV cameras and screens, and a picture showing the outline of an object is formed. If no signal is sent out by the scanner, it's called passive or millimeter wave radar. If the subject is illuminated by a separate source of millimeter wave radar signals, it is an active scanner. Since passive systems can penetrate clothing and non-conductive walls undetectably, it is obvious that with just a small millimeter wave flashlight, non-conductive walls can be scanned through and still very little detectable signal is present. Millimeter wave through clothing, through luggage, is currently in use at airports. In addition to mind control experimental observation, millimeter wave scanners are ideal for stalkers and voyeurs, since the subject is portrayed in the nude. Millimeter wave scanners can be purchased from Millivision Corp., Northampton, Massachusetts. Information at www.millivision.com. Thought reading. Thought reading appears to be one of the easier components of electronic mind control, given that a commercial and unclassified thought reading devices are available and being actively developed. Thought reading is an enhanced version of computer speech recognition, with EEG waves being substituted for sound waves. The easiest thought reading is actually a remote pickup of electromagnetic activity of the speech control muscles. When we say words to ourselves silently or read a book, we can actually feel the slight sensation of those words in our vocal muscles. All of that is absent in the passage of air. Coordinated speech signals are relatively strong and relatively consistent. The other kind of thought reading, i.e. mining, is someone's brain for information from a distance, is speculative. We targeted individuals have no way to verify that this is happening. However, we do not know that we are being fed hypnotic signals to force constant neutral content, but of different character than prior to becoming test subjects. These forced neutral content, bland content, dreams occur very single night and may represent the experimenter's efforts to have our experiences portray themselves in such dreams, in effect, mining our experiences. Again, this is speculation, but it seems very logical. Appendix TR4, referenced below, confirms the availability of current unclassified technology to actually see what a living animal sees electronically. It is therefore extremely likely that these forced dreams can be displayed on the experimenter's screens in an adjacent apartment or adjacent house, which are made obvious to the involuntary experimentee. Finally, among the 300 known neuroelectromagnetic experimentees, we often have strangers either tell us that we are thinking, say they can pick up our broadcast thoughts or tell us about events inside our homes at times when they could not have seen them from outside. Bugs aren't used, and they have been searched for. Implants. Electronic implants are actually one of the older forms of electronic mind control technology. Implants can either receive instructions via radio signals passing them to the brain, or can be interrogated via external radio signals to read brain activity at a distance. Many of them, about 300 known involuntary neuroelectromagnetic experimentees, do not have implants, but have aggressive and thorough regimen of mind control effects anyway. Implants are still significant, though, for these reasons. One, their use since World War II and continuing to the present day associated with MKUltra atrocities is a crystal clear indication that a motive pool of unethical researchers has existed through the 1970s. The same people, none jailed, are still working by and large. The reader can see that the existence of the same motive pool is overwhelmingly likely, given that no social changes have occurred which would prevent that. The fact that to date, as of autumn 1999, no victim who has had implants removed has ever been able to get custody of the removed implant shows that research programs using implants are still quite active and obviously quite important to some. See www.ritualabuse.net/MCF, the Mind Control Forum, for details on involuntary experimentees, implementation, and removal experiences. The use of implants show that in the field of involuntary human experimentation, not every perpetrator group has access to the most sophisticated implantless technology. Since implants for beneficial purposes are actively being promoted by the NIH, it is obvious they will not disappear anytime soon. Conclusion. While the documentary evidence in this report does not exactly prove we are being targeted by intelligence defense contractors using classified electronic weapons, it certainly eliminates the argument that no such devices are impossible, don't exist, or that the government has no interest in them, or that they were tried years ago but didn't work. In addition to the experiences of victims of the Tuskegee untreated syphilis experiments, the feeding of radioactive food to uniformed U.S. citizens, the feeding of radioactive food to uninformed U.S. citizens, and the atrocities perpetrated under the institutional drug child abuse phases of the CIA MKUltra programs. And you have more than enough grounds to petition for an independent, open investigation. No doubt there were citizens of ancient Pompeii who argued that the Vesuvius could not possibly erupt in their lifetimes. Vesuvius could not possibly erupt in their lifetimes. Faced with all the evidence, no honest government can afford to take the risk that electronic mind control actively may be happening, controlled from their own back rooms. Eleanor White. If any doubts as to the importance of this issue remain, please see below what the U.S. NSA says would be the result of releasing information on electronic mind control.